Welcome to the Perinatal Wellbeing Podcast. I'm Christine, your host and certified perinatal mental health professional. This podcast is all about authentic conversations. We want to open up the discussions around perinatal health and well-being, from mood and anxiety disorders to breastfeeding to grief and loss in the perinatal period, and everything in between. While this is not therapy or medical advice, it is the place where we are going to continue to open up the discussion around all things perinatal mental, physical, emotional, and sexual health to help reduce stigma and break down these barriers to support. I acknowledge that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which Perinatal Wellbeing Ontario is located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. I am proud to acknowledge that there are 46 treaties and other agreements that cover the territory now called Ontario. I acknowledge that I am a settler on these lands, and it is on these ancestral and treaty lands that I live, learn, and work. Hello, and welcome to Perinatal Wellbeing episode number 13. Today is the second part of my conversation with Lisette and Catherine from Together Waterloo. Together came out of a desire to increase the services available to families struggling with perinatal mental health in the Waterloo Region. Their goal is to increase support systems, educate healthcare providers, and build a village so that no parent is left behind. In part 2 of this episode, Catherine and Lisette share how they started Together Waterloo, advocating for more perinatal mental health supports, building a community of survivors and parents, and how they're making shit happen in Waterloo. Lisette Weber is a postpartum doula, the social media manager for The Climb for PSI, and co-founder at Together Waterloo, along with Catherine Mellinger, an expressive arts therapist. They are both trained in perinatal mental health and are making things happen in this space. Please know that in this episode, we do discuss intrusive thoughts, birth trauma, postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, OCD, intrusive thoughts and compulsions around sleep and food, challenges with nursing, rage, trauma, NICU experiences, and we do have some swearing.
But what I realized and what Catherine kind of confirmed for me was that Waterloo Region doesn't really have supports. There is a support group run out of an earlier center, but you had to go to it. You had to commit to 6 weeks going to it. And me in my head, if I leave my house, she's going to cry because I'm incompetent. People are going to think I'm incompetent and somebody's going to take her away. Like there was no way I was going to leave my house to go to this support group. It wasn't going to happen. And so this is kind of like where we realize that like there needs to be more options. There needs to be, not every support group is for every person. So like there needed to just be more. But at that point, we didn't really know. We had no plans.
We had no plan. We just had attitude.
We just had a lot of attitude. Yeah.
Yes, which is helpful.
Yeah. It was just like, why is this? Why is my family doctor only offering me medication?
Right.
Why aren't they offering me a referral to somebody who actually knows about perinatal mental health?
And why are they actively withholding that referral? Because that happened too, where it was like, you don't need that. Like for somebody to come into your office and be like, I would like a psychiatric referral because I'd like to have a bigger discussion about whether this is the right medication for me. And to be told by your family doctor that you don't qualify. Like how much it took for you to even ask for that referral. That made me so mad. I was like, are you effing kidding me? This woman just had so much courage. I know, but still like, that made me so mad. I was like, I can't believe they actually said no, like that they have the power to withhold that from you. And that's a gateway. Like they just shut the door.
And what if I was not telling her that like I was suicidal?
Yeah.
I had like, maybe there was a little mania happening. Like she doesn't know what I'm not telling her. So if I'm saying, hey, I need more support than you can offer me.
Right. How did
Like,
that feel for you, Lisette, that she denied you that referral?
um, it really feels like you're silenced.
Yes.
Like, as someone who knows about, perinatal mental health, has done extra trainings, I know how to advocate for myself. The doctor works for me, essentially. Why aren't you listening to me say to you, hi, something more is going on here. I can't explain it to you because you're not going to ask the right questions.
Right.
So it just really felt like I got shot down. And it was like all my family doctor wants to do for me now, 4 years out of after my first, like I have 2 kids, but
Yeah.
like 4 years from like my first experience with true mental health struggles.
Yeah.
For me to be like, I need more, and to get nothing. And all she wants to offer me is an increase of medication.
Of
Like,
one medication in
of
particular.
one medication. And that I'm just like, I don't feel in control yet. And that's just what I wanted, was just to feel like I wasn't gonna have these experiences of like so much anxiety, that I have so much rage. I want to get ahead of it, because I have kids who my actions affect their growth and development. Like, just shut up and make the referral.
And I think that's the hard part, because then what happens is, and you can tell us what happened with you, Lisa, but what I see a lot of times is then people, they're kind of like, okay, I figure this out somehow. But then again, they get to that next like breaking point, right? Where like, I cannot cope. I'm lying on the floor, calling my partner, my husband, to come home to help me. I can't do this anymore. And so I'm trying to reach out again, right? Or that's when, I'll, as a therapist, get an email at 3 a.m, like, I think I have something going on, please help, right? That's not okay.
No.
Why do we have to get to our breaking point
Mhm.
where we are not coping? Because I
Mhm.
hear you that I was in the same place. All I could do was feed my kids. That was it. I could not do anything else. I could barely even look at my older 2 kids. I didn't have time for them. I couldn't cope.
Mhm.
Why do we have to get to that point to
Mhm.
beg
Mhm.
for help?
Yeah.
That's not okay.
And why does it have to get to the point of harm for so many people?
That's right.
I mean, this is the reality of what we're confronting. And I don't just mean physical harm. I mean, why does it have to get to the point where you are considering hurting yourself
Yep.
to be able to get support? Why does it have to get to the point where, even if you're not physically harming someone,
Right.
like you're stuck in this pattern of such like connection equals rage, or the alternative is disconnection, that you're like emotionally harming the people around you, not intentionally, because you literally have no tools. And why does it have to get to the point where harm is caused? I mean, that's essentially reactive then, right? Like everything we're talking about is a reactive space. None of that is preventative. So why does it have to be that we have to reach this reactive point where potential harm will be caused in order to just get the help that we need?
Yeah.
Because probably by the like all the steps that we've gone through to actually reach the point where it's nearing harm, like whether that's, thinking about hurting yourself, like having these massively awful intrusive thoughts of like potentially hurting your baby, like, harming people emotionally, raging out. Like the damage is already done, and it's just, that's the part that's really devastating to me. Because also, if you're somebody who's in that position where it's gotten so bad that you're potentially emotionally harming people around you, you're not okay about that. Like that's actually worsening your own condition when you're already at your limit. And then you're also thinking that much less of yourself because you're completely aware. You're completely aware of how shitty you feel about the way you are with other people. And then you're doubling back on yourself, which is just making everything that much worse, because now you're just proving everyone's stigma. Now you're just proving that you're some piece of shit who got to have kids and you don't deserve it. Like, I mean, that's just the cycle, right? And that's already way too far. It's already way too far.
And that's also what I see. And for the longest time, I kept trying to get validation from like therapists and people in the field. Like, can we experience postpartum mental illness as a trauma wound? Can we experience that as a traumatic event? And like everyone was like, yes, yes, right? Because that's how I felt, is like looking back on that period, right? Having post-trauma symptoms, the fear. I mean, this was my third kid, so we were done having kids, but the fear of having another child just shut me down. Like if I thought, like I did have a scare once and I was like, I'm going to have to be hospitalized. I cannot cope with this. What am I going to do? You know, do I even want this baby? Like it was just so hard. And thinking back to that time of like, you know, it was terrible. And so it's like those post-trauma symptoms coming in because that experience in itself felt traumatic. Right. And so then it's like we recover from the mental illness piece, but then we have to recover from that experience, like you were mentioning, Catherine, right? Of like emotionally harming other people, emotionally harming ourselves, being harmed because of our thoughts and how we're feeling and how we're not coping. Right.
And for a lot of us, we grieve, like it's like the grieving process.
Absolutely.
Of like, I lost all that time. I didn't enjoy this period. I don't remember when my baby started crawling, like the grief that comes with that too. My uterus also totally just like wanted to like suck itself up when you mentioned having another baby. Cause I deal with that so much. Like, and nobody talks about the fear. Nobody talks about that fear, like the fear of getting pregnant again. Everybody's just like, when do you want to get sexy with your partner? I'm like, I do not know what I'm going to do with myself. People don't understand how visceral that fear becomes and how it becomes like an assault trauma, because just the thought, like your body just reacts before you even have any say in not having it react. And nobody talks about that fear. Like all people talk about is getting intimate with your partners again. And nobody talks about the real fear of getting pregnant again and what needs to be involved. It's not just the emotions that got to be involved to be intimate. Like for me, it was like, I need to know you're not going to get pregnant, period. And I also need to know that that still means we're going to be able to have good sex. Like nobody talks about that. Absolutely. Nobody.
So Lisette, I wanted to ask you, you know, you kind of went over, you know, your story with your first. I'm just curious to know when you had that realization of, oh, because I did the same thing. Everyone I hear when I kind of talk about either postpartum depression, anxiety, any mood disorder that we're kind of like sussing out, and they're like, oh, that makes sense. How did it feel for you kind of being able to put that language to it and figuring out like, there's actually something going on here. This is just not what the experience is. It's that there is a mental health issue.
It was a relief to know that like I wasn't just broken, that there wasn't like that there actually was something wrong. Like it wasn't just that like I was going to be an incompetent parent. It was, I have mental health struggles. Okay, let's work with this. So when we were planning on having our second, we knew off the bat that like we have to have a doula. We knew that support after the fact was necessary and what kind of support we needed to know like where we could go for lactation help, where we could go, who we could send my daughter to so that we could just have a break and nap. Like it was just having that all like figured out. So when I got pregnant again, my son was actually initially had the exact same due date as my daughter. So I was like immediately like, this is the exact same thing. It's all going to happen again. Like it was very much a like, holy crap, it's happening
Right.
again.
Yeah.
But then like his due date got moved up 2 weeks. So like my pregnancy was suddenly 2 weeks shorter. It was great. And his birthday was moved further away from Christmas.
Right.
And so like we were just very intentional in knowing like what we needed and what we would need to like have planned. We found like an amazing doula who had like a lot of birth trauma experience. So like we knew that there would be somebody with us who would be able to like handle it, who would be able to advocate for us for in the ways that we needed. So that we wouldn't end up in a birth situation where it was like, what's happening? So we welcomed our son in like the beginning of December 2019. I had a home birth, which was amazing because like we played a board game with my doula, like through all of my labor.
Amazing.
So like the second we finished it, my water broke. He was born like an hour later, whatever.
Perfect
it was
timing.
really great. And like things did go the same. Both my kids ended up in NICU. Because like I don't know about I birth very quickly, apparently. So like they don't get all the like fluid out of their lungs. So they always need support. And then they have to NICU and they're always like, oh, well, maybe they have an infection. Let's do some antibiotics. So like we're stuck for like another 48 hours with each kid in NICU, which sure. Like, but it was so different because we were supported. It was, you know, our NICU stays were like completely different. The first one was like nobody talked to us. We didn't know the rules of being in NICU. We didn't know where anything was. The second time we got a tour, we got like rooms to actually sleep in a bed. Like it was so different. And like our doula brought in an RMT who can do like jaw releases in newborns. So like that helped with nursing because like to get out, he had to like nurse enough to like be weaned off of the IV. So like it was just amazing to like have this community of support around us. And so like it was great. Like I was dealing well, like things were fine. I was sleeping well. And then like March 2020 happened and everything closed. Everything was gone. Suddenly I had no support system. I couldn't send my daughter off to have help. So like at that point, I went through a pretty deep depression where it was rather hard to get out of bed, but we made it through because like we maybe didn't have the physical support that would have, you know, been helpful, but we did have, you know, people we could text or like, I'm pretty sure Catherine like dropped off chocolate at one point. Like it's just, or like people bringing us food. It just like, there was little things that people could do without physically being there for us. And, so that's kind of where I realized that like, I had my baby before the pandemic, but I very much had like, I have a kid who grew up during the pandemic. There are people who had to give birth with masks on. Like it just, like for me, it was like, I know how to deal with this. I like, this is like, you're heading into year 3 of it all. Like, it's just, I could find the help I needed. I need to help other people find it. I need to help other people make the plans that like I made so that they can be okay too. Because I didn't want anybody to feel alone. I didn't want anybody to feel like there was no resources. Like I wanted to do that groundwork for people so they could type in like, I'm feeling depressed in Waterloo Region, like after I had a baby, and like find actual resources. So like this is when Catherine and I started talking, and like I started my doula certification to become a postpartum doula. And then Catherine and I, we were like, we need to do more. And we both ended up doing the PSI 2020 Mom Maternal Mental Health Certificate at the same time. And that's kind of when we learned about the climb. And I was just like, is it crazy if we bring it here? Is it, you know, can we build a community here for perinatal mental health? Is there something that we could be doing? And that's kind of where this all came together.
Can I just ask you just another kind of quick question about your experience?
Yeah.
You know, that first experience of not being listened to. This is what I heard. Not being listened to, you know, people not explaining things, kind of like, you know, in the delivery, like things happening to you and not like you being a part of that process.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that all contributed to that event feeling traumatic for you?
Oh, absolutely. Because like
Yeah.
I had reoccurring, like I would play it over and over in my mind. And it took years before like it finally didn't feel charged. Like I
Right.
had my nurse while I was delivering told me to calm down because I was having like a panic attack because I'm like, what the hell is happening? And she's like,
Right.
you know, this freak out isn't going to help anybody. And then
Oh God.
like after I had like, so they moved me to an OR because her heart rate dropped. So she had to get out fast. So I was going to be given one contraction with forceps or they'd prepare me for an emergency cesarean. I got her out and the one contraction with forceps.
Right.
A lot of
Yeah.
determination of like, fuck no.
We're gonna do this. Yeah. I hear that.
I'm gonna get her out. Like
Yeah.
I'm not ready for like anything else.
Right.
But then after I had lost so much blood in all of it that like I started like kind of, you know, I had a fever
Yeah.
and like I threw up as you do in childbirth because your body is like hormone city
And in so much
and in
pain.
pain. So the nurse was all like, oh, well, let's not do that again. It's like, this is your whole job is to take care of birthing people while they are giving birth, pooping, vomiting,
Yeah.
like
Yep.
is all part of it. Like, why
Absolutely.
would you say that to somebody? And so like it's just so ingrained in the birth story for me that like
Yeah.
this happened. And then like the fact that, you know, I was in a bloody hospital gown for 24 hours after my daughter was born because
Exactly.
I wasn't alert enough
Of
to
course.
know that I should maybe ask for that
Right.
because I
Well,
just gave birth to a baby I
right.
didn't see until she was 12 hours old.
Hmm.
So like I had to.
And I'm wondering if you even felt comfortable to ask for a gown, like thinking that is that even possible that I can ask, considering how not helpful they've been to this point?
Yeah, I mean, like that probably was all in there. Like, you know, like
Yeah.
I'd lost so much blood. They were like, took blood to find out whether or not I needed a blood transfusion. That same nurse was like, well, it's time for you to rest, but I'm going to wake you up every 15 minutes to make sure you're still responsive. It's like, how that's not comforting. It's just like, how about hey, I'm sorry that this gone this way and you'll have yet to like see or hold your baby. Like, because she had to get taken right off to NICU because she wasn't breathing. And so it just was like, how about some compassion? It's
Did anyone ask you after the fact while you were still in hospital, how are you?
I don't think so. Like
Right.
the midwives who came
Like
in,
the right,
like,
but like the hospital staff, like that was a really difficult experience. Are you okay?
yeah, no. There was
No.
there was one point where like when we came back from seeing our daughter that like I was like just sobbing into my husband and like the nurse who came in asked me if I was okay in such a way that I felt like it was a bad thing that I was crying.
Oh,
Like it was in such a tone that it was like a what's going on in here kind of like a like
right.
but it's like I just gave birth after an induction and a forceps, 45 minutes of stitches. I didn't get to hold my baby until I didn't get to see my baby until she was 12 hours old, was told off by the NICU nurses that I wasn't allowed to touch her because she was sleeping. And then
Hmm.
like, I don't even know how old she was before. Like, I can't remember anymore how old she was before I got to actually hold her. The nurses in the NICU just like gave her to me, said, okay, time to start breastfeeding, and walked away. I'm just like, this is the first time I'm like holding this new human. Like,
Right. Yeah, we're just getting to know each other on the outside.
hi, can I please put my boob in your mouth? Like,
right. Nice to meet
nice
you.
to meet you. Here's my boob.
Oh my goodness, Lisette.
So it's just like,
wow.
it was a lot. And so like for everything to feel like it was going the same way with my second was just, it was really hard to like cope with at the beginning, but then realizing that like we knew any better. We planned to have a home birth so long as like the ducks were in the row, and like we got the doula, like it all, and then it all was, I'm not going to say it was all fine, but it was way better.
Right.
Because like I had a home birth, which was like followed by an immediate NICU or transfer to hospital, because like he came out and did not like to breathe.
Held his breath a bit.
Yeah, he just was like, I'll just, take a minute here. But because also, this is another good point to make about people knowing anything about perinatal mental health, was that the midwives were so wrapped up in the fact that I was and am on an SSRI, that when I gave birth, the babies might be a bit lazy to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
But they still let me have a home birth. But it totally like filtered their whole focus of what was going on. What they were so focused on like the fact that he wasn't breathing because I was on antidepressants.
Oh my gosh.
Like it, and like I could hear them talking, and I'm like, you guys are literally now blaming me for the fact that my baby's not breathing. Mm-hmm. You, the doctor, like you, the midwives, who are supposed to like be very like you
neutral.
Well, or even just like, if there's any risk, they don't do home birth.
Right.
So like, if they really thought it was a risk, why did they say, okay,
why let me?
Yeah.
Why did they let me do a home birth if they thought it was going to be a problem? And we get to the hospital, and it turns out that his foot was just too cold, that they couldn't get an O2 reading.
Oh my gosh, Lisa.
But because they hadn't been able to get me on antibiotic drip for strep B, he had to be held in the hospital for 48 hours of antibiotics, because like it went quickly, and priorities, she's pushing baby, or do I put the IV in, like
is that the SSRIs just ended up clouding the entire post-birth experience.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting too, because I was on SSRIs during my entire pregnancy with my second, just like you, Lisette. Mm-hmm. And I was, like home birth was off the table. I mean, for various, like, it's just so interesting because it's
different
experiences. And then just like, what is the thing in your profile that tips the scales towards one decision or another?
Right? Like, is it like how much you are having?
Yeah.
But like, we got to the hospital, the pediatrician told my husband that SSRIs aren't that big of a deal when it comes
to it's a 0.2% chance.
Like a 0.2% chance that you might have a lazy baby.
But it's a chance, so it becomes a liability.
But I'm like, okay, why? But like, it just clouded their judgment. Mm-hmm. They didn't warm up his foot. Suddenly he has no O2. Like, it's, anyway.
And for them, it's like, they wouldn't even remember that now. But for you, that is a big part of your story that influenced, your experience, then like being home and then having the birth that, felt like you mentioned, kind of it went better than the first
Mhm.
one, and then having to be transferred to hospital, like that is a big ordeal,
But
right?
and I would say that it wasn't like I don't feel traumatized. I was able to birth at home away from the people who made me feel so little. It was kind of like rejuvenating.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
my priority was to have a home birth without that nurse to who would tell me to just stuff my feelings. Like I think I was so convinced I would end up with the same everything that I was like, there's no way I'm going.
Mhm.
And so for me, there's no trauma in my birth because I got him out and he was fine. Like there was this other like stint and we went to NICU, but like being there was fine. Like they
Right.
were supportive, like it felt so compassionate. I ended up knowing one of the NICU nurses at that point. Like it just was like, it was so different. Yeah.
And that's what I find in common with anyone that I come in contact to that has had a traumatic birth. It's generally, of course, the details of what happened are important, but every single time there were staff that were not supportive
Mhm.
in the stories that I hear,
Mhm.
right? No one asking, are you okay? No one even acknowledging what happened to the birthing person,
Mhm.
right? No
Mhm.
one kind of like checking in on them, and kind of as soon as baby's out, it's like, okay, fend for yourself and we'll take care of the baby, which, okay, great, take care of the baby. But can someone ask how the birthing person
Mhm.
is?
Or if they're
Check
there for
in,
2
have that
days,
compassion.
here's a towel so you can shower.
Yeah. And that you can't
Absolutely.
define that for somebody else. Like that's the
Right.
biggest thing. You can't
Yeah.
define.
You have to ask.
You have to ask. You can't. I mean, I've had friends who have scheduled C-sections who are like, that was a fucking breeze. I've had friends who have labored for 30 hours and feel great about it and empowered. Like you cannot define. I think we keep looking for a definition of birth trauma, and you
Right.
cannot define it because it depends on such a complex system of factors
Mhm.
that I could have the exact same birth as somebody else and mine could be traumatizing and theirs might not be. You cannot define what that is. You have to ask. You have to ask. You have to get specific. You have to listen. You have to like never assume. I mean, I recently saw someone post on Facebook that her midwife had defined her labor as traumatic. And I was like, I would never
No.
define for my client that their birth was traumatic. I would never place that on someone's birth experience without them naming it for themselves. And I would also never negate someone defining their birth as traumatic. I would never dismiss that. If you are defining your birth as traumatic, let's talk about what part of it was. Like we want to package this and we want to say, okay, how can we stop births from being traumatic? Okay, so if it's a home birth, it's not going to be traumatic. If it's this kind of birth, it's not going to be traumatic. You can't do that. You can't do that because it's so personal, it's so individual, and it's so complex that you have to let that person tell you what felt different or what felt off or what felt wrong that created a trauma response to that experience.
Mhm.
Somebody could have a 5-hour picture perfect birth at home and come out of it completely traumatized. Somebody could go to the hospital and have a 48-hour birth with like 2 hours of pushing and a whole bunch of cascades of medical interventions and come out of it feeling empowered and great. Like you can't define that for anybody. And that, like you said, that's what's missing. Like what's missing is people actually listening and people actually taking the time to understand the personal complexities of somebody's experience instead of being like, oh, you had a home birth, it must have been so magical.
Right.
Oh,
yes,
you had a cesarean
absolutely.
section? Oh, that must feel so awful for you that you couldn't birth naturally. Like,
Right. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Absolutely. And being, this is a systems issue. Again, I think we could probably do a separate 10-hour episode about this, but it's like having trauma-informed birth workers, trauma-informed hospital staff, and then afterwards, whatever the experience, asking also, because that's where I see like we can also help with those post-trauma symptoms or even the experience feeling traumatic for someone if people were acknowledging, wow, that was a near miss.
Checking themselves and being like, wow, man, I'm really activated just listening to this, but this is not my shit. Like, I got to take my shit and go to my therapist, or I need to go put it somewhere else, but I can't give it to this person because it's not theirs. It's not theirs to hold. Like, check yourself. If you're being activated by somebody's birth experience, if you're being activated by a situation, like, go speak to someone about it. And also for us to have a system where there's always someone to talk about it, because it's easy to be like, go talk to your own therapist. Well, can you afford your own therapist? Do you have the means? Do you have the time? Do you,
exactly.
But yeah, I mean, just that trauma-informed piece, like, especially with the hospitals too. I mean, I don't know any obstetric nurses who have access to mental health care at the hospital, so that if they're being triggered by somebody's birth experience that they're assisting with, they're going to be able to go talk about it. Like, yeah,
absolutely. So through your experiences, you guys came together. See how I did that there? And started working together, to make a change in your area, in some of these systems. So tell us about that. What have you guys been working on?
So we started by bringing the climb to Waterloo Region, which is an international fundraiser through Postpartum Support International. And like the whole sole purpose of it is to create community. It's not a support group. It's to be where your people are, to find people who have like experiences, because that shared kind of, it's like you go to a climb and it's like you're just like coming together with people you haven't seen in like 10 years. It's just sort of
building a village.
Yeah, it's creating that community of like, we've been there and now we can just share about how many times our kids got up in the night, or how many times did they leave cookies in their pockets when you do the laundry, like,
or how desperate I am to go to the bathroom by myself.
Right. So that's what started it. And then we're both part of the local Perinatal Mental Health Coalition, and it just felt really like it's good. It's great that this is happening for the region, but for us, we were just like, yeah, but what about all of the parents who are still being affected while we're waiting for the coalition to become public? Essentially.
Right.
So
and it was also us. I think it was also like one of the things that we talked about often was that we felt like two nothings in a group of a bunch of somethings. Because one thing that's really beautiful about the coalition is that it's a number of organizations who are coming together and pooling themselves. However, for Lisette and I, it was like, I'm an independent, you're an independent. How can we give ourselves more agency and more clout, essentially, so that we don't feel so useless? Just being this like independent expressive arts therapist who runs clinical hours and does, like arts advocacy, or the independent postpartum doula. Because one of the things we realized was that us as independents had more training than any of the staff from the organizations.
In perinatal mental health specifically.
Which is changing. Like, we are making it change.
Yes.
But for us, it was just like, we're tired of feeling like these two little independents. Like, how do we use our privilege? Like, how do we gain agency? How do we make ourselves more present and feel more powerful at the table, essentially? And I think at one point we just realized, oh, we actually have everything we need. Like we actually, we have all the things we would need to do this. We don't have to wait for other people. We don't have to. And also we have the advantage, there's a lot of advantages that comes with being in an organization in terms of access to funding and, access to community supports. On the other flip side of that, we have a huge advantage as two independents to not have to deal with the red tape, to not have to have things approved by managers and executive directors, not having to, not having to need to find funding in order to run programs. We have the climb. We can do that with the climb. We can fundraise our own money. We can use our own agency and our own bitchiness and our own passion and come together literally to drive that forward. And I think that was really empowering for us, where I think, Lisette, the number of times you were just like, we could just do this. We could just do this.
I was like, we have money. We like the climb, we can fundraise for a local organization and keep the funds, some funds here.
We can be our own local organization that we are raising funds for, and we can actively make decisions and just do it because we have the capability of doing that. And then along the way, we can use that privilege as like two female identifying and presenting white people in Waterloo Region. Like we can also use that privilege to like have all of these other unseen territories get a little bit more light.
Absolutely. And so what is it that you guys are doing in the community? Tell us about
what the hell are we doing?
What are we doing again? So starting actually on Tuesday, we have been fortunate enough that we can offer a free expressive arts therapy group for perinatal mental health. So we filled 10 spots with parents who
are struggling
or would find this helpful, and it's free. Like they had to pay nothing. I spent like half of my day yesterday delivering art packets,
dropping off art kits to everybody.
So like that's kind of the big number one thing that we're doing, and it's been, the response from the community has been amazing. They're just like, yes, we need more of this.
And even other, like, because there is like, we have Stork Secrets in Waterloo Region that's been like the sort of place to go for people, and thankfully during the pandemic they've been running virtually, so it's more accessible, because Lisette and I have both had the experience of being terrified to leave our homes with our children after having babies. So there's no way in fucking hell I was going to be going to an earlier center. And like exposed, like feeling like I was exposing myself in that way. So that's been really positive. The thing that I love is that like people within that program are also referred people to our group, to just say like, you can have a ton of stuff and it will always get filled up. Like there's no competition here. There's no stepping on each other's toes. Like we just need more, period. This is not about taking away from or replacing. There just needs to be more, and there needs to be people who uphold that. So I will refer to them. They will refer to us. Like it's just, we are all trying to do the same thing. As best
we're all in the same sandbox, and we have to
we're all in the same sandbox. I'm just going to offer a bunch of fun little art supplies over here. Like it's also offering something that's different, because I'm a trained expressive arts therapist, that's how I work. That's the modality that I work through, that I offer perinatal mental health supports through, and that I've had success with previously. So you're facilitating the group?
Yes.
Catherine? So I'm going to be facilitating the group for 12 weeks, and then the group will end like 4 days before our next 2022 Climb Out of the Darkness event in Waterloo.
So we're working on that right now. We're in the planning stages of finding sponsors and fundraising, so that we continue the work of Together. And it's just growing. We've already surpassed how much we raised last year, and
amazing.
Well,
I'm not excited.
Even I know it's not even April, but I'm just excited that we now have this group as like, here is proof of what we're doing. We are creating a free support group for new parents
Mhm.
or people who just need it. And like,
because we can,
it's happening.
and we don't have to ask permission to do it.
No, we're just like, yeah.
And they're accessing it.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
They're accessing the group, which is amazing.
And that hopefully that just grows. I mean, I think that's something that we want to make sure is just a consistent part of what Together does.
Mm-hmm.
And also because like Lisette and I met in a prenatal class, like you never know where you're going to meet somebody who is just going to be able to like get you, you know, and
Absolutely.
And all of those groups, like that's why there can never be enough groups, because you never know which group you're going to go to where you're just going to meet somebody that you just click with, and that it's going to, and especially right now during the pandemic, like it's so much more difficult for people to make connections as new parents. So, you know, I mean, Lisette and I would have said like, if we hadn't been in that, like if we just met each other on the street, who knows if we would have been friends, but that connection through the prenatal group and then through the climb and through advocacy and through our experiences have just like, we can hopefully offer that to other people who haven't met each other yet, and maybe they can come join together and like continue to help us advocate. And then hopefully, I mean, you know, we have other plans. Like we've said, we're like the mini version of Perinatal Wellbeing Ontario. Like we feel like we're your like little mini sister or something.
Oh my God, I
in
love
Waterloo
it.
Region,
Yes.
because we have the same goals, right? It's like providing support. I mean,
Absolutely.
we're running the climb, so that's like a very regional specific event because they're all over. Well, it's international.
Yeah.
And then hopefully it just grows from there, like in terms of similar to what you want to offer in terms of education,
Yep.
and a whole hell of a lot more advocacy. And then hopefully it just sort of grows from there. I think what's really magical about it is that we get to say to each other, like, could we do this? And then usually the answer is like, yeah, like it'll take work and we'll need partners. But
Lots of
yeah,
work.
like we can do this. We can do this. We can do our own, we can make our own thing, and we can be connected to all these other organizations, and we can be connected to the coalition, and we can be connected to you, and we can be connected to Postpartum Support International. But we're not just two independents who have nothing to say.
You guys have a lot to say.
Like I think in coming together, like, I don't know, I feel like I've become that much more aware of like how much agency I actually have as an individual. And I don't know if it's the same for you, Lisette, but it's just really empowering to be like, oh, could we just do this ourselves? Like, could we just do this?
I think that's basically my text to you is like, what if we just did it? Like, what if we just do it ourselves?
What if we just did it? Yeah.
What if we call ourselves this? What if this is what we do? What if we offer free support groups and free perinatal mental health trainings? How do we make this happen?
Do that? Yeah.
Like, let's just do it.
And let's just do it, because we can.
Let's just have the climb to build community and to raise funds and just do it. Like, let's
to have our own organization that the climb funds go to, because we're going to do something active and immediate in the community, and that like we're trained for it. Like, I think that's the thing that often when you are an independent, you can sort of forget, right? And maybe that's also just like my own self-esteem stuff. But, you know, like for Lisette and I, it was like, great, like we've done these trainings. Like, we're actually more trained than a lot of people in this.
We're both qualifying for PMHCs. Like,
yeah, like why aren't we doing this, you know? And then for us to also realize, because I was taking the training because I wanted to specialize in my independent practice, and Lisette was taking the training because she wanted to have that perspective as a postpartum doula. And it was initially like, we're doing these two separate things. And then it was that moment of just like, but wait a second, like if we're both trained to do this and it's our passion, like we can still have our postpartum practice and our clinical practice, and we can also do this because we need more trained people in our community who are offering programs and who are helping people with resources and who are speaking to them in a terminology that's important for them to take to their family doctors, so that, you know, they can advocate for themselves in a way that they will be listened to, because they'll be using the right words and the right language and that like medical complex way that you have to talk. Yeah, really, it was just like, should we just do this by ourselves? And that's like, yes, yes, we should.
The answer is yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, and
yeah,
We can, we will. Let's get going.
We did.
And you are.
And we are. Yeah.
Right? Like you are doing it, which is amazing. And I'm so excited when I see your posts, when I see, how much you guys are raising and how well you're doing. And, I'm going to put all the links in the show notes for your website for Together, for the climb. And I can put your social media, handles on there as well, so people can get in touch with you. So if you're in the Waterloo region and looking for supports, this is the place to go to figure out, what you need and what's available in your community. And also for anyone listening who wants to donate or wants to participate or any of those things, they can reach out to you guys. And also, for anyone listening who is kind of like us, right? Like these independents. And that's the beauty of this, I'm finding, is connecting with so many amazing, perinatal mental health trained therapists, doulas, midwives, birth workers, like the whole, gamut, is that there's such an amazing community out there of support workers, of people who are, living in it right now. And it's that connection, which I think is doing amazing things like you guys are doing and, we're trying to do. And so if you're listening and you want to connect with Lisette and Catherine, in the Waterloo region, just reach out to them and let's, keep growing these services.
Yeah. We're here because we want to hear from people. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We joke that we're going to get bracelets made that say "get shit done" because that's like our catchphrase all the time. We're both very action driven people, and we're always texting each other after like a chat or whatever, like getting shit done. Like,
nice. That's awesome. Yeah. Yes. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Yes, no problem. And I think it's going to be so helpful for people to hear those stories and then, be able to connect with you guys and connect in the community. So thank you guys so much for all the work you're doing. It's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. And we're excited to be part of the Ontario bigger family too.
We're excited to work together.
Yeah. Thank you guys. As you can tell, Lisette and Catherine are two badass perinatal mental health activists who are making things happen. You can really hear the passion and conviction in their voices. I'm so happy they talked with me about their experiences and how that brought them together to where they are now, supporting their community. I think it's amazing that they have actually implemented services and supports and are continuing to build community. If you want to donate to Together Waterloo through the climb, please go to their website at togetherwaterloo.ca. If you would like to know more about their services, check out their website as well, and you can always get in touch with them on Instagram, and I've put all of their details in the show notes. Leave a comment about your thoughts on today's episode and make sure you connect with all of us on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please share this podcast with any of your friends or family members who may benefit from it. If you feel you are experiencing any of the symptoms or issues that we discussed today, please reach out to any one of your supports. You can also go to perinatalwellbeing.ca for more information, blog posts, and podcast episodes. Check out our new episode every Wednesday.